Hello and welcome to what is going to be a very different episode of the D5 podcast with Nathan missing due to technical issues. I'm your standing host, Lewis Walsh, and joining me today are Tom and Alex from the DN35 podcast. Fellas, how are you?
Yeah, we're good, thanks, man.
Good, thank you.
I can't answer it, Tom. I answered on your behalf, then, man. I'm sorry. I assume you're all right. Is Portsmouth still lovely?
Yeah, no, I'm fine. Yeah,
good.
Yeah, glad to hear that, guys. So I thought we'd start with kind of your result against Torquay at the weekend. So do you want to talk us through that?
Tom can tell you because he was the only one that was lucky enough to go. I mean, just cut out the floodlight bit, I think, mate.
Yeah, it was an interesting game. Obviously, I think before the season started, everyone was expecting a bit more from Torquay, and they've had what I think most fans of them would describe as a disappointing start. But they actually started the game the better side for the first 10-15 minutes. They had quite a bit of the ball and spent most of the time probably in our half, I'd say, for the first 10-15, but without really creating any clear opportunities. And then they got a couple of free quick kicks in quick succession, one of which was right on the edge of the box with 18.5 yards out, absolute maximum, fairly central. And the guy hit it with good power, and it got up and down over the wall. And the local BBC reporter for us said that it took a deflection. From where I was standing, I couldn't see whether it took a deflection or not. But our keeper sort of was diving that way and caught it, and he parried it into his own net, essentially. And then after that, we got a real good foothold in the game and dominated for the rest of the half. Scored two nice goals. The first one especially, Afete sort of beat a couple of players cutting in from the right wing, and then got to the edge of the box and sort of smashed it in the far corner. And after we went 2-1 up, I couldn't see who it was because it was right at the other end of the pitch, but one of their players made an outstanding block on the line to save 3-1 going into half time. And then in the second half, we started the stronger. First 5 minutes had a succession of corners. And then it became quite a scrappy game, really. Both teams just sort of, I wouldn't say launched it, but certainly played more balls, searching for something over the top, rather than trying to play the football, certainly from a Grimsby standpoint, trying to play the football that we played in the first half. We had a debutant on loan from Bristol City, Riley Towler. He played pretty well. They're obviously hopeful that he's going to be dangerous from set pieces because they aimed a lot of corners at him.
He's like 9 foot tall.
Yeah. And he did win a lot of headers.
Beautiful young man as well. Beautiful. Matt Dean couldn't take his eyes off him, our commentator. He spent the entire time going, he could be a male model. He could be a model. Look at him. Look how pretty he is.
He's got long hair.
Yeah. That's what Matt likes.
But yeah, he looked good on the ball as well. He did a nice step over to get out of trouble in the first half when they were under pressure. Well, yeah, it was a good performance overall from Town, but like I say, the second half was from both teams pretty scrappy, and there was 9 minutes of stoppage time, not because there was like a serious injury or anything. There was just loads of stoppages throughout the second half, and the referee added them all up and added them on to the end of the game, which I quite enjoyed because I think there's definitely an argument in professional football to have an independent timekeeper these days. So it was nice to see a referee actually add on some proper stoppages. So there you are.
Yeah, so you did come from 1-0 down, I suppose. Do you think being able to come back and win 3-1 is reflective of the good character in the squad? Do you think it shows that they've got a good fight back ability, maybe?
I'd like to think so. It's not the first time we've done it, and it's usually a good indication that the team are well in for it. We've been relatively lucky compared to other National League sides. Our pre-season started quite a long time before most of the others. I think most of you were still playing games by the time we were sort of 6 months into our summer. So it's given the team a little bit more chance to bond. And I think also we're seeing that we're pretty fit and we're pretty organised. And I think that sort of stamina is starting to come through. We've scored quite a few goals late on in towards matches. And that seems to be a real play. I mean, Harry Clifton, for example, he played the entire game, 95th minute, still had the legs to sort of run 80 yards and put the third one in. So it's nice to see that sort of a strength and conditioning coach may well win you 3 points on a Saturday.
Yeah, and I suppose that's kind of contributing to what is your best start in 30 years. Do you think that start can be sustained, or do you think you'll drop off eventually?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we've got tomorrow against Wrexham. That'll be a good test. I think we've played some quite difficult teams already, but I know it's been 30 years, but the caliber of teams that we've played in those 30 years have varied wildly. So it'll be interesting to see if it is. I can imagine us doing pretty well against Wrexham tomorrow if they've not got their head on it. They seem to be. Their fans anyway seem to be more focused on the Stockport game coming up.
And it is 5 games in now since your relegation. How do you think the standard in the league differs to when you got promoted out of it 5 years ago?
Tom, that'd be a good one for you, man. I
don't think it's massively different. I think when we were last year, there was only a handful of teams that weren't full time. And I suspect that is still the case. I think the sort of major difference this time is that there's a bigger group of sort of more sizable clubs, if you like. There's ourselves, Wrexham, Chesterfield, Notts County, Stockport County. Last time there weren't really that number of clubs who arguably are all of a similar size and stature, and I think that makes a big difference this time, because you're sort of fighting rivals who can expect to get similar crowds, and that will make a big difference.
I think you're also seeing a rise of, it feels anyway, that there's less faith in the system. When we were down here last time, you'd find teams like Braintree and alike who had real faith in the system. They'd put 10 men behind the ball, have a really decent set piece taker, and you'd get punished. It feels at the moment it's more focused like League Two would be towards individuals, maybe because of the price tags they've got on their head. So I don't know. That's my opinion, but I haven't seen enough to suggest what quality it is. It feels very similar, and it feels like we've played a mixture of those sort of teams, Weymouth being one that would stick 10 men behind the ball and not give you anything.
Yeah, you always are going to get those sorts of sides, aren't you? But to kind of turn the discussion more towards back to Grimsby, there was obviously that change in ownership over the summer. What would you say the mood's been like since that change? Because I know things weren't the greatest under your previous owners.
Well, I talk about it too much, but I'm living on a cloud nine at the moment. I know there are other clubs in the league that have got more attention for their owners. Ours don't necessarily wear sort of latex masks and stuff. I mean, they might do, but they certainly don't advertise it. They've been really open. They've been really straightforward. They've done a lot of things. I think they've been relatively lucky. They've been allowed. I think the club has got some very hard-working individuals who love the club to pieces, and they've been given almost the freedom to start to maximise their abilities and their ideas. So you're seeing that the matchday experience is one of the things that fans have really loved. It's gone from just having a really greasy, dirty burger to having food that should not be seen in Grimsby. I mean, but there'll be falafels up here next, but there was like, it's certainly changed a bit that way. On the playing side, I think everybody trusts Hurst. I think he got a slightly easy ride towards the end of the season. I mean, it was an absolute car crash last year, but I think other fans would, another manager they'd be more demanding on. I think the fans have faith in what he can do. And I'm just generally happy. I don't know how you feel, Tom. I mean, our content's taking a hit. That's what I keep saying, because there's only so many times you go, oh yeah, things are going really well. I liked it when Ian Holloway was crashing like caravans onto the training pitch.
Yeah, I think the new takeover, the reaction to it has been overwhelmingly positive, and they've already come in and changed quite a few things on the football side. They've installed a new pitch at the ground, for example, and at the training ground. They've got like a new gym at the training ground. They've hired like a full-time chef for the first team. So they've invested quite a lot of money in off-the-field stuff. We've got a new strength and conditioning coach. We've got an analyst as well now, performance analyst. So they've invested in things off the field which weren't there the last time Hurst was here, and that though the lack of those things was one of the things that ultimately led to him leaving to go to Shrewsbury.
I also saw something, Tom, on one of the videos on the bus. You know, you get those little I don't know what they go on the headrest, and they have like whatever Virgin First Class on or anything. They all had the town badge on. That's how posh we are now. Yeah.
Amazing.
We get Recaro seats.
See, we've got swanky buses now as well. Whereas before we just, went on, buses that broke down, didn't we?
Can you remember that, Lewis, when our bus we were on, I think it was a bank holiday Monday, and we were playing Alfreton, and the bus got stuck in in traffic on the M1, and they had to patter and fill for 2 hours, and they had bus watch as a camera in a corner.
Yeah. I think I do remember that, and I think I just thought it was typical of the league at the time. But yeah, that was just a bit of a mad day for you, I thought.
Yeah, no, it was more typical for Grimsby at the time, I think, than the league.
we used to probably have one of those buses that I mean, I'm maybe too old, that used to actually have to pull the handle open to get out, I'd imagine.
Yeah, and then just to kind of look towards Torquay, actually, it's another poor result for them, despite kind of being the playoff finalists last year. Why do you think they've struggled?
I was having this discussion with someone at the match on Saturday. So it makes you Torquay, when you look at where they are geographically, it makes you, their squad was significantly smaller than ours. So it makes you wonder whether they have to sacrifice maybe a handful of players so that they can afford to have overnight stays and travel arrangements that suit them for the distances that they have to travel. And so if they maybe get a couple of injuries, I don't really know what their squad situation is in terms of injuries, but maybe they've started the season with a couple of injuries. I was reading sort of on the couple of the Torquay podcast threads on Twitter, they were saying that Gary Johnson has asked people to judge him after 10 games. So they're obviously halfway through that, and they're towards the bottom of the league. I'm sure if he puts a string of wins together in the next 3 out of 5 games or 4 out of 5 games, they'll probably move up pretty quickly. It's a pretty tight division. But yeah, it seems a bit odd that they've started poorly, but then, as you said, or Alex said at the beginning, they went pretty much all the way in the playoffs, so they will have not had much time off to rest before they were back into they were probably almost immediately back into pre-season, which probably doesn't help at this level.
Yeah. To look towards one of the other games in this league now, Stockport 0, Yeovil 3. They're another side that are having a bad start, Stockport. And despite their star-studded strike force with, Paddy Madden, Scott Quigley, they've gone 3 games without a goal now. Do you think it's maybe just a case of them taking time to gel?
One thing that I mentioned on our podcast about Paddy Madden, especially, actually, no, it wasn't Paddy Madden. Apologies. I was thinking of Paul Mullen. I'm going to call it. I think they're going to be the Middlesbrough 1995 Middlesbrough. They're going to have Ravanelli. They're going to have Janino, and they'll get to a cup. They'll get to the FA Trophy final. But I don't think they'll get relegated. But it just seems to be. It seems to be a team of individuals rather than focus on a system. And it's. I don't know if it just takes a couple of years. I mean, it's going to be such a bun fight up there this season that you worry for the manager if they're not first, second, fighting it out with Wrexham by Christmas, and then if they do bite for it, then and the manager takes the bullet, then you're worrying for the process and what is that another 18 months, another 2 years as they sort of build. When we played them, they missed a hatful of chances, and they should really have lost that game. I don't think the goal that we scored should have been chalked off, and so they could have been a point less. And I don't know. They just felt like they needed a man to take charge of the middle of the pitch. From my experience, I don't know if you had any other thoughts, Tom.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you do just need that sort of experience in the middle of the pack. As for Yeovil, though, it's been a great start for them. I know quite a few people predicted them to be kind of maybe mid-table after losing one of their top goal scorers in Reece Murphy. Do you think they maybe can sustain that, or do you think they'll maybe kind of drop off after a little bit?
They bought the right Quigley. I don't. Is Russell Slade still manager there? I don't know.
Oh, it's been quite a time since Russell Slade was still managing them.
It's just wishful thinking. I'm trying to get him as far away from us as possible. Tom, I don't know. What have you seen much of Yeovil? They seem to always bring in half decent players. Like we had Tilly from them as well, didn't we?
Yeah, I haven't seen much of them. I think it's hard to say who will sustain a promotion challenge and who won't sustain a promotion challenge after 4 or 5 games, as pretty much everybody's on in the division. Like I just said about Torquay, you can easily string a run of games together because they come thick and fast generally at this time of year in the conference. I think it's easier to judge after sort of 10 or 12 games, isn't it, when a quarter of the season has gone pretty much.
It's going to be really interesting to see what they're like when we play them at the end of October, because they played what? They've had, they had what? Kings Lynn and Aldershot, 2 relatively, would you say, easier fixtures that they both lost compared to, say, something like beating Halifax and Stockport. So coming off I'm just buttering you up, really, Lewis. But it'll be interesting to see what they're like, because they've got obviously Chesterfield, Notts County, and ourselves. If I don't mind saying, like, as a more difficult team to beat. Whether or not they've now found their feet, a couple of games ago they'd have been, in the mire.
And yeah, you just mentioned Halifax. Then we're actually going to look at their game. They beat Southend 3-1 at home, and they actually went 3-0 up at one point. Now, Pete Wild's got Halifax overachieving for the past couple of years. I know he was linked with the Grimsby job at one point. Do you think that Halifax maybe have it in them to overachieve again, or do you think they'll kind of maybe have like a mid-table finish this year?
As long as they don't break Tom's heart when they beat us in the trophy final.
I certainly wouldn't mind a repeat of that.
Tom was the only broken-hearted Grimsby fan that day, I think.
I was, yeah.
I don't know. It's an interesting one. I've always thought Halifax have got a relatively decent network around them, and I've never thought that they've necessarily taken full advantage of the resources they've got around them. Look at the clubs that are within 30, 45 minutes of where they're based. I would be absolutely shoving any kid from any youth system, from Barnsley to Sheffield to whatever, and go, right, use us, get them out there. We'll play 5 loan players every week if we can, and do it. I think they're relatively well located as well, and I'd love to see the Shea absolutely rammed. It's the
you've rammed it before, haven't you? I think the last time we played you at home, you actually outnumbered us.
It was. Do you know what? That was the nadir of that season for us. It was because that was the game you won 4-2, wasn't it? Was that right?
Yes. 4-2.
It turned very nasty for us. I think there was suggestions of racial abuse aimed at Toto Nasala. I think that was the closest we got to. That was us shooting ourselves in the foot that day. A good town crowd is always great to see, but it can be quite explosive and volatile at times.
And to kind of turn it towards Halifax's opponent, Southend, they've kind of come down, but they've just struggled. What's going on with them? Do you think they may be just finding the league harder than they would have thought it would have been?
Sorry, man. The stuff that I saw from Southend fans with it, Brown's starting to get a bit of. There are some uneasy Southend fans. He's very quick to throw players under the bus rather than talking about collective performances and collective responsibilities. They're sort of talking about, well, if you're going to act like that with your players, it's not surprising you lost the dressing room last time round as well. And they're really looking for a reaction from tomorrow, and it'll be interesting to see what happens with them 3 or 4 months down the line. I can see Brown going before Christmas if results continue. The problems with Southend haven't gone away, but the Southend fans have seemed to almost done the same as what we have. They seem to have rallied, and they're coming in numbers. They just don't have the team that necessarily is supporting their support. That was not even a word. That was just noise.
Have they resolved their off the field issues from last
I don't think so.
No,
I don't think so.
Ron Martin's still the owner there, isn't he?
I think things were pretty toxic there off the field. The two teams that have come down, I think we're the team that's come down and managed to get things together on and off the field, whereas, I think if things are basically still the same in terms of the club ownership, it wouldn't surprise me, because they were in a pretty bad place last season in the league. They basically sort of just struggled. I think they beat us like back in October, November time, whatever it was, but they just continued to struggle like we did.
It was that Blake that was on loan on trial for us, and we got rid of him, didn't he? And he scored 2 against.
But I think a lot of their struggles were related to ongoings off the field and the discontent that's developed with their fan base. So yeah, it will be interesting to see what happens to them, because that's like a. Southend, I don't think I mentioned them earlier when we were talking about like the big teams in the conference this year. They are a big team at this level.
And you got to wonder whether or not Phil Brown's the manager that you want to be. He doesn't necessarily have experience in this league. He doesn't. Southend have come into it as a club that haven't experienced National League. I think one of the things that town fans can at least prepare ourselves for. We know a Tonkin by somebody we've never heard of, and I have to Google, is coming. And I know full well we'll lose 5-0 at Wealdstone at some point, like we did against Braintree. And I think that prepares us. Hurst obviously knows the league quite well, and we were ready to go. But it's whether or not Phil Brown has that mentality. He feels more Holloway than Hurst. Apologies to Phil Brown. No, nobody needs that. Nobody needs that comparison, but you're a Hall man, so I don't like you anyway.
Looking towards some of the other fixtures in this league, we had Bromley 2, Boreham Wood 3. I think one of the key things we've seen from Boreham Wood at the moment is that the defence is kind of winning them games. But there was a couple of good saves from the keeper, Nathan Ashmore, in the last game. Do you think having a good keeper is just as vital as a good defence? Or
yeah, we saw that in our game at the weekend. I think
without doubt.
One thing we missed off was James McEwen made an absolute worldie of saves, didn't he, Tom?
McEwen did make a worldie save, but more to the point, the Torquay goalkeeper looked shaky. And I think we've had it in the past where we've had a keeper that the defence don't believe in. And it does have a big impact on your ability to keep clean sheets, which is obviously it's going to be important for teams like Boreham playoffs anyway. So like for them, having a keeper, might be the difference between sneaking into the playoffs and not sneaking into the playoffs. But for Bromley, they're probably going to be looking more to try and stay up, aren't they?
It's amazing how well
Yeah.
Boreham would have been, sort of, considering they lost their star striker. I watched the interview of their chairman shortly after the sale, and he came across really level-headed and really sort of knew his stuff. And to lose them and still be at the top end of the table fighting, I think is justified in terms of how well they're planning their season and how well they're going. I fully expect to lose 2-0 at their place. Does the away end still not have a roof and just a portable toilet?
I think it's just the same as it's always been. I think it's still not got a roof, just a very miserable place to go. I've done it away, and it's just not nice at all.
I look forward to losing 2-0 in the in I don't know if you can swear on this podcast, but in the rain.
And then speaking of other miserable places to go, we've got Kings Lynn coming up next, and they lost 2-1 to Dagenham in their last game, which was on BT Sports. And looking at Dagenham, it's another good result for them in what's been a fantastic start to the season for them. Do you think they've maybe got the potential to be this year's underdog winners, like we've seen with Macclesfield, Barrow and Sutton in the past couple of years?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? So, I mean, I was looking at some of the Dagenham and Redbridge fans' sort of responses to the game, and they were relatively cautious about how the team had played. They felt that Kings Lynn, if they'd been slightly more clinical, would have walked away with 3 points. But that in a way stands you in good stead, because you don't go into any game with unrealistic expectations. And well, I mean, they certainly put us to the sword last season, even if they were rock bottom of the National League at the time. I think any club within driving distance of London or that have always got an opportunity both to attract players and to use the resources they've got around them, whether it be Championship or Premier League clubs to pull in players. I mean, even at this level, you can be looking at teams like even Leyton Orient and stuff to have someone like Craig Clay or something like that. I don't know.
Craig Clay, man, don't get me started on him. He was dreadful at Halifax, but for some reason he's just become a decent midfielder everywhere else he's been.
Yeah, he's good. Love him. Love the bloke.
For Kings Lynn, though, I suppose they looked capable of causing Dagenham problems at times. I mean, they might be in the relegation battle, so it's just a case of, can they do that week in, week out?
I haven't really seen them play. I didn't get to see the match, but I mean, if I'm paying, how much is it a ticket? Like 40 quid or something like that at Kings Lynn?
25 quid, I think, which is ridiculous.
I'm not wanting to watch a team battle for its life for 25 quid, whether I'm in Kings Lynn or not. It's going to be interesting. It's whether or not they're able to score more goals, and that's usually the answer. They look defensively resolute from what I've seen, but I don't know. I don't think it helps. Again, we sort of talk about what networks they have around them, and if they're going to establish themselves, I don't know them enough to think that they've got. If I know a club, I'd know they've got a good ethos and you understand what they're about. I haven't got that feel from Kings Lynn yet. So as always, I expect them fully to tank us at some point.
Yeah, and on to another game in our league now. Aldershot 1, Solihull 2. I mean, that's 5 losses on the bounce for Aldershot now. There is suggestions of ownership problems there, but just how much trouble do you think they're in, and what needs to change?
Well, I've got a friend who's an Aldershot fan, and he said we're doomed.
and yeah, I live here. I live in Aldershot, and yeah, that's pretty much the thought process they've got. They've lost 6 games at home on the bounce. They are very much wanting Searle out. They've got a fans forum on Wednesday, which could be quite explosive. So by all means, have a watch of that if you want to see anything.
Is it on YouTube?
Oh God, is ours still on YouTube? I mean, if anybody wants to laugh, wants to see a car crash of an interview, then watch our fans forum on YouTube. I imagine it's still there from a couple of years ago. But I don't know what's going on with them. They've got a half decent goal scorer at least. Is Paddy McLaughlin still there? He was like paying on a pay-by-play basis, wasn't he, at some point? Not Paddy McLaughlin.
You thinking of Ross McCormack?
McCormack, that's it. Paddy McLaughlin used to play for us. And that's a name that I've just picked out of the air.
I was going to say who's Paddy McLaughlin, but no, I don't think McCormack's still there.
Yeah, they've always been able to find a half decent striker. I'll have to go down and watch them, but again, it's one of these. It's like I've only got one opinion, but they're a team that have Chelsea on their back door every day. Their pitch is relayed by them. They have. I mean, you see some random games at Aldershot. I watched Fulham v Sampdoria a couple of seasons ago at Aldershot's ground, but I'm worrying about them. Their ownership isn't good. It feels more focused around the stadium renewal and process there than it does about the actual on the pitch activities. And speaking from experience, that ain't no good sign.
And for Solihull, rather, I mean, in terms of what happened on the pitch, it was a late winner for them, and it was their first win of the season. Just how much of a morale booster can that be?
Scoring late does help. Yeah, absolutely. I don't know much about Solihull Moors anymore. Do they still have Jamie Osborne? I'm just going to ask this every time.
Yes, they do still have Jamie Osborne.
Oh, I miss him. He was decent. And yeah, I can imagine Solihull Moors. They're one of those clubs that I know what they're about.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen, Tom, have you seen anything with Solihull Moors? I've never been. But it'll be.
No, but I think you're right. They're similar to Boreham Wood and sort of clubs like that. Like they've got quite a defined sort of model, really, of how they're going to operate financially. And they're obviously sort of hoping to get players that they can sell on at a fee to basically fund their existence at this level, and maybe fund having a pop at the playoffs now that it's open to 7 teams, which I actually think is quite healthy for the league, because it means that we've got sustainable clubs.
Do you think we had their hand off when we paid 50 grand for Bogle and Tishmanga went for like 250 or whatever it was reported?
No, I think that was a really good price for them at the time, because they were in the Conference North or South.
Yeah, they were in the Conference North at the time.
And I think Chesterfield had to pay the price for Tishmanga because there were clubs from the league interested in him, and they obviously really wanted him.
Well, what I will say about Solihull before you go there, it's a little bit like what Underhill used to be like, but without the slope. You know, they've just thrown a bunch of little stands at it just to kind of get the ground up to requirements.
It's a little village fete, is it?
A little bit like that. Looking at one of the other smaller teams in the league, you had Weymouth pulling off a 1-1 draw with Notts County. Now, Cal Roberts did score a free kick to open that game, and how much of a difference maker can a player be like? Can a player like that be if they've got that little bit of quality about them?
In this league, it's absolutely everything, isn't it? It's something you can build around, especially if you're a dead ball specialist. It gives you another dimension and another fear. And when you've got a team like Weymouth, who I absolutely adored watching Weymouth play. They played decent football. They knew their game plan. They put 11 men behind the ball. They made it absolutely difficult for us on the first game of the season, and they really, really made us work for it. And I think a club like that are going to be absolutely fine this season, because I can understand their game plan, and they will cause a couple of upsets. What they probably are missing is that dead ball specialist, is the guy who can really whip it in and to cause problems, because that's sort of what separates a team like Weymouth from finishing 18th, 17th to being like a Braintree a couple of years ago when they were fighting us in the playoffs. But I don't know. It's going to be it's an interesting one for Notts County. They seem to have started all right. What did I put? I put that the County when they finished. I think someone like you just pick out the goal scorers like Wotton as well, who's going to get on the end of things. The problem they have is, Wrexham aside, people go to Meadow Lane, and it can be a cup final for them, isn't it? And it can be, maybe that might help us, because people like coming to Blunder Park going, oh God, look, it's got 2 tiers. They're going to somewhere which holds like 20,000 instead, and getting overawed there, and that's the game they want to impress at. Yeah, I don't know. It would be nice to see where they are. it's never nice to see Notts County down here, but it's a good away day for us.
No, they're a good historic club, aren't they? And it's just never nice to see a club like that struggling. But yeah, on to another club that people want to go to and act like it's the cup final. Wrexham, they had a 1-0 winner at home to Woking on Saturday. I mean, Paul Mullin, I mean, everyone knows about him at this point, but he set up the goal this time as opposed to scoring it. Do you think he's maybe got that ability to be the creative player in that forward line as opposed to the goal scorer, or do you think he's just going to be a goal scorer for them this year?
I think he's personally, and this is going to bite me on the arse, this is my one. I don't think he's going to do amazingly well. At Cambridge, he had Wes Houlihan putting the ball on a plate for him. He doesn't have that at Wrexham. And I think he might struggle that way because he hasn't necessarily always been as prolific as he said. I assume he'll score 65 goals now, but that's my one opinion on it. I thought Woking did really well and acquitted themselves considering it was a relatively party atmosphere down at Wrexham. I'm sorry, it should be. Is it not Ryan Reynolds is Wrexham? Is that not?
Yeah, Ryan Reynolds is the full name now.
Yeah, they'll play Paul Scholes' Oldham in a few years, but it was nice to see. Wrexham are another one of these clubs where I think they've suffered enough. They treated Sean Pearson well for us, and another FA Trophy final defeat for us. They were in good voice in what was the coldest game on record in the whole of football history. And it'll be nice for them to. They deserve a little bit of love and a little bit of thing, but I might be tired of it come Christmas.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it's a little bit nice to see a club like Wrexham as opposed to a no-name club like Salford, maybe. And on to clubs that have kind of had a little bit of a rise this coming from Norway. You've got Eastleigh, who drew 1-1 away at Barnet, and they were a little bit of a wild card coming in, looking at people's predictions. Some people had them in the playoffs, some people had them battling relegation, and at the moment they are battling relegation. Do you think that's kind of the level, or do you think they can turn it around?
I think they're going to probably be in the bottom half. That year that they got to the playoffs, they went out and bought a load of big name players who still basically had a season or two in them, and it paid off for them. And since we haven't really seen them since then. And yeah, I think they're just going to be another one of the teams that sort of make up the numbers, really. I don't think anybody's expecting them to do major things.
What's the state of them at the moment? Because to me, we leave the National League, and I'll be honest, I don't find it offensive. Nobody looks back. Nobody checks. There's a reason why people who visit the who are on the Normandy landings don't look at the pictures back. But it's to me, they were a bit of a cash club. They had a bit of money behind them, and they were floating. I mean, is that still the case? Was it just been swallowed up because Chesterfield have got $250,000 to spend on some bloke from Boreham Wood?
Well, I think what's happened was that they had Stuart Donald, who was their owner, who was putting all the money in, left to go buy Sunderland and ended up on the documentary. But I think what's happened with Eastleigh is that he left, but he kind of set them up to be kind of self-sustainable. And so they've just kind of been able to sustain themselves at this level, despite not being a money club anymore. So I think they're kind of a club that are able to do all right without that money. But I don't know if this is kind of 1 year too far for them or what.
They don't feel that they never felt like a setup that a club that was going to stay here for a long time. They felt like a club that are going to jump between the two leagues and potentially have a half decent, successful Conference South career and move back and forth. The problem you have is there are clubs always developing. Look at Dorking Rangers or Dorking Wanderers. Sorry, look at the teams behind them. Boston as well have improved their setup up our neck of the woods. There are always clubs at that level that are building and getting plans, and if you like Eastleigh, you just stand still for a bit before you know it. You're in the conference and you're not top of the championship like we were 20 years ago on the 1st of September.
No. And on to another fixture now. Wealdstone won, Altrincham 0. I mean, it was the first win of the season for Wealdstone. I mean, if you're in that sort of relegation battle, how vital are wins against teams that are in the middle of the pack or teams that are around you in that sort of battle in the lower half of the table?
I think this part of the season is massively underrated. So you have that first furore of the first game, and then you kind of just get into the rhythm of it. But you set yourself up at this time, if you're at this time in April, you're desperate for those points. There are teams that are just using it to bed their players in, gel together. You've got an opportunity to really avoid relegation quite early on and almost change the sort of outlook of your season by being really sort of going for it and playing for it. And if a team is dedicated and works hard for themselves, they can really sort of get somewhere. And someone like Wealdstone, who to us is something like a club that will be down there and struggling, it's a useful one to really to get in there. And if you've got those middle pack games, they're the ones that you'll get your points from.
Yeah, I mean, it's always going to be wins that you're going to be wanting to get in against us. I mean, it's all right getting wins against the teams maybe at the other end of the table every now and again, but you've got to be consistently getting those wins. But on to our last game now, Dover 0, Chesterfield 0. I mean, rather surprisingly, Dover managed to keep the Chesterfield strike force of both Danny Rowe and Kibongo Shimanga quiet. Do you think that's maybe a confidence booster for Dover? And do you think it's a sign that they might be able to upset the apple cart now and again?
I think they'll upset it, but I don't think they're going to get out of it. If they haven't even recorded a win yet, you need to get that points total off the table as quickly as possible. And I don't think their plan that they had last season has worked as well as they'd hoped. It's a nice thing. I imagine they'll still take some points off them, but it'll be interesting to see come January what they're going to do. If they're still caught adrift and they're on 6-7 points, which isn't ridiculous to see come their
minus 11 they're on at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah. So if they get to a point like in January when they're on like 7 points as a total, or they're on like something like that, I can imagine it folding pretty quickly, and them almost doing the similar thing that they did last season, where they almost get rid of anyone that's on the top of the wage budget and is weighing them down and preparing for life in National League South. Because I can't see them with the performance that they've had at the moment. I can't see them getting out of it.
Yeah, I mean, I feel the same way. I mean, it does almost feel like they've almost accepted that they're going to be going down at the end of the season. It's all about kind of how they prepare for that life in the Conference South. But that's all the fixtures we've gone through, and that's all the time we've got. So thank you to both Alex and Tom for coming on. And is there anything you'd like to promote before we finish?
No, not really. I mean, if you're not a Grimsby fan, you're not going to listen to our podcast unless we're playing you. But if you obviously support a fan to support one of the teams we're coming up against, by all means, drop us a quick DM on Twitter, and it'd be good to have you on to talk about what we're coming up, because as you can tell, we have no idea who anyone is. We're the guys who've just arrived at work, new guys at work, and we have no idea who everyone is. We're looking around for Gateshead, and wondering why they're no longer here.
It's sort of like coming into a TV series as a new character in like the 10th series or something. They're completely new to it. They don't know what's going on. Absolutely. We don't have any idea who anybody is, but we're a returning character. Yeah, so you got killed off in the 2nd series, but you get somehow brought back in the 10th.
Yeah. We're Janine coming back to EastEnders, so it doesn't fit right. It's not as good as it used to be, and people are getting quite tired of the storylines that we put out there.
Yeah. Anyway, that's all the time we've got for. I'd like to thank Alex and Tom for both giving up their time to come on tonight. Thank you for listening. If you didn't like me as a host, well, good news, you'll probably have Nathan back next week. And if you did like me, well, yeah. Thank you for that. So, again, thank you for listening. See you next week.